And we're not live, but we are recording. I'm here with Ryan and Connor. Ryan, how you doing? Connor, how you doing?
Yo, what's up, Caleb?
I'm fantastic. Great to be on again.
Happy to have you both on. You both been on before, but it might have been a while. We got new subscribers, so you have anything you want to say about yourself? Now's the time to do it.
My name is Ryan. Happy to be here. Love my friends, hate my enemies.
There we
Gosh,
go.
I can't say anything better. I'm Connor. I'm not even going to add to that. It's perfect.
There we go. Wonderful. Well, today we're continuing the live reading of Liberty Equality by Erik von Kuehnelt Leddihn. It is a big chapter. It took Ironcast and I about an hour to cover 12 pages. This chapter is like 80 pages. So we're going to cover as much as we can in this episode. This is going to be probably an all year long series. So if you're enjoying the series, I'm glad. If you want to get through it faster, pick up the book yourself and read it. I recommend everyone read it because it's a fantastic book. Leddihn is just such a incredibly dense but really fun writer. Okay, well, let's hop into it. To begin with, Connor's going to be doing the reading, and when he has to dip out, Ryan will take over the reading.
All right. I guess I'll just start reading, and you guys stop me when you've got a comment. It's Chapter 2, Democracy and Totalitarianism, the Prophets. I can't even attempt to read that German quote, but his quote, he starts with, "Above all things, men and women, believe me, the world grows better from century to century because God reigns supreme. From generation to generation, let pessimism be absent from our minds and let optimism throw its glory over all our souls and our lives henceforth and ever." From W. Gladstone. And he gets off, the 19th century political thinkers. The notion that tyranny evolves naturally from democracy can be traced back to the earliest political theorists. There are allusions to it in Aristotle's Politics, but the description of this evolutionary process in Plato's Republic, books 8 and 9, provide us with a picture which, without exaggeration, can be called an almost perfectly accurate facsimile of the insidious transition which took place in Central and Eastern Europe after 1917 and especially after 1930. Here we find a description of the mass rebellion against the elites, the deification of youth, the ever-mounting expropriation of the well-to-do until they begin to defend themselves, whereupon the masses select a leader whose task is to protect the people. We see the bodyguards paid by the demagogue, the flight of the wealthy and of the intellectuals, the rejection of democracy by the desperate upper classes as a result of this development, the evolution from protection to tyranny, the spoliation of the temples, the militarization of the masses, the recruiting of criminals into the police force, the provocation of military conflicts in order to impose emergency measures at home and thus a stricter national discipline, finally purges and a mounting wave of corruption.
I think there's definitely a lot to comment on there,
Yeah.
especially that last part, because we see it happening today in front of our own eyes. I mean, just to start, we could talk about the militarization of the masses. I mean, if we talk about post 9/11 and the Patriot Act, and the propagation of military conflicts in order to impose emergency measures at home and thus a stricter national discipline. I mean, I think that pretty much predicts the Patriot Act right there. And
yeah, I mean, the irony of this chapter is that it's him quoting the people he considered to be the prophets of this topic at his time, but he's sitting there writing himself in what is the same concept. He's looking back on it now. He feels like the prophet of democracy and totalitarianism. All of this sounds like it was today.
I mean, look at the next line. I mean, even not necessarily military conflicts, but imposing national emergencies like the COVID lockdowns. We saw that all over the world, basically in all Western countries were shut down. You know, I don't think anyone had a say in that. So that goes your democracy right there. I don't think anyone voted on that.
Nope. Yeah, it's how put this. It is odd how it's interesting how he outlined physically all the stuff, and he kind of each point of like the what was it out here? the deification of use, the ever mounting exploitation of the well-to-do until they begin to defend themselves. I mean, if you want to talk about the deification of use, that's something I think that is kind of like children are the future. They can do whatever they want to be. So much so they end up picking their own gender now. Like it's just that's something I think that gets kind of missed over how much this current culture deifies young people.
Well, and I always say, so I'm a middle school and high school teacher for any of your viewers who don't know, and I've always been saying, I teach at the school I went to, and I always say that one of the big things I've seen change in the decades since I was a kid there is that the kids are so overwhelmingly believed by their parents. And that obviously, like, you know, children are fine. I'm not saying you shouldn't trust your kids, but like sometimes you shouldn't trust your kids. And I constantly am saying, look, there's times where I'm talking to people and I'm like, look, I'm sorry. I'm sure your 12-year-old thinks that this story isn't how it went, but that is not correct. We need to discuss I'm not going to obviously talk about kid specific issues, but X, Y, and Z. And the parents will be like, no, my child says that's not true. Sorry. There's been an overwhelming deification of youths where people trust the word of a child over a grown adult. And I mean, constantly that reverberates throughout society. He nailed it with that one.
He's most of my comments on this is this going to be how awesome he is.
Well, it's a little bit later. It gets hard because he kind of quotes other people and then like responds to them in a very poignant way. So it's kind of hard to comment any better than he does sooner. But we'll try.
Let's continue.
All right. From then on until the advent of the 18th century, there was not much speculation about the nature of political evolution, but the debate about the intrinsic qualities of the various governmental forms continued in full vigor from St. Thomas to Montesquieu. Still, the character of these analyses and investigations suffered somewhat from the relative uniformity of the political scene up to the American and French revolutions. Democracy, for instance, apart from the certain city governments, had been restricted to very small areas. The political theorist had to rely largely on antique and certain medieval patterns. The French Revolution, offering the spectacle of quickly following transitions, revived interest in organic political changes. France, the most populous and powerful country of Europe from 1789 to 1815, had run the whole gaunt of political evolution. And though the purely external forms of the ancient regime had to all appearances triumphed, the democratic trend was, in the eyes of more far-seeing observers, bound to gain the upper hand after recovering from its temporary setback. The ancient regime had suffered grievous defeats before it smashed the revolution, and from now on, it could not, in a psychological sense, any longer be taken for granted. Joseph de Maistre exhorted the supporters of royalism to defend the monarchic form of government with intellectual arguments, a sure sign that the patriarchal regimes henceforward were phenomena under discussion and thus had ceased to belong to an organic order. Those observers, on the other hand, who were convinced of the ultimate victory of democracy, the historical ultimate, of course, were sharply divided between those who expected from it a new stability, balanced and legitimate, and those who, mindful of the experiences of 1789, regarded it merely as a preliminary step to tyranny, Caesarism, or totalitarian servitude. Some of the latter, like Alexis de Tocqueville, P.J. Proudhon, Herman Melville, J.J. Beethoven, and to a certain extent also Herbert Spencer and Friedrich Nietzsche, expected the rise of what Mr. Hilaire Belloc aptly calls the servile state. Others, overlooking the possibility of a peaceful and gradual evolution, were fascinated by the potentialities of the dialectics of democracy and democratism. They followed a direction of thought indicated by Plato and, up to a point, by Aristotle. Also, among these we find Walter Bagehot, J. Burckhardt, Konstantin Leontiev, F.M. Dostoevsky. You're going to get, I can't pronounce any of these people's names. I feel terrible. I only read them. Ernest Renan, Franz Grillparzer, Soren Kierkegaard, B.J. Niebuhr, J. Donoso Cortez, and Benjamin de Constant. To the aforementioned, a group of other analysts should be added, thinkers who varied in their affinity and enthusiasm towards democracy. Some of these were outright enemies, others, again, were friends of the democratic ideology. But they all had very concrete fears and apprehensions, which in time proved to be well-founded. Among such men should here be mentioned Edmund Burke, Alexander Herzen, Count Montalembert, Royer Collard, Lord Acton, Provost Paradol, J.S. Mill, Lord Bryce, Sir Henry Maine, Orestes Brownson, W.E.H. Lecky, Henry Adams, H.F. Emile, Alexander Vinet, and Benjamin Disraeli. Contemplating this list, it is certainly no exaggeration to state that during the 19th century, some of the best minds in Europe and in America were haunted by the fear that there were forces, principles, and tendencies in democracy which were either in their very nature or at least in their dialectic potentialities inimical to many basic human ideals, freedom being one among them. It is important to note that about half of the men mentioned could be called liberals, and there is no doubt that the liberals in this group were the most concrete and the most vocal in their denunciation of the impending evil.
Yeah, the part about calling them liberals, I know it's not his fault for the time he's writing, but I can't take the word liberal serious in any context now. I have no idea if it's like we're talking about Mises, or are we talking about someone like Irving Kristol? We're talking about someone like Hayek. We're talking about, I mean, it's just such a hard word to take.
Well, and now, to his credit, because you're right that in 2023 it's hard to take seriously, but to his credit, he gave a fairly substantive list of people saying more than half of these are liberals. It's pretty fair that we can get a ballpark of what he means when we look at that list of names.
Absolutely. And as I said, I recognize maybe a quarter of those names. But this is just so many names. I'm like, yeah, I heard about that guy once on a podcast. I don't know anything more than that.
That's what makes him so impressive. Is like, you look at this list of names he read. I'm like, if you just wrote a book without contributing anything yourself, just summarizing what all these people said, the time it would take to read all these people and familiarize with themselves is unbelievably impressive. Then when you add in his commentary, the guy is brilliant. Oh yeah,
I'm guessing I talked about this last episode, that the 20th century thinkers and like academics and scholars, we call scholarly people, was just a different breed of people, different class of intellectual. The amount of knowledge they had, like, I mean, Mises was an economist. Oh, we lost Ryan. He'll come back. Mises was an economist who would write on, like, in Theory of History, he has a whole chapter on Thomism and natural law, pretty much. You know, like, he was an economist, and this guy was a humanities professor, which means he already has to know a little bit of everything.
And then on top of it, Mises not just was an economist, but he was an economist whose whole job was basically paid for by Henry Hazlitt, who was a journalist, and his job as a journalist is unrecognizable to what a journalist is today. I mean, it really was a different breed of intellectual back then. Yeah. Like, if you look at the concept of a journalist writing a book the way Hazlitt wrote several books, is, I mean, it'd be absolute garbage today. Yeah, but absolutely. Intellectuals back then were actual intellectuals. They were legitimate intellectuals, not
they knew a little bit of everything.
Garbage we get today.
Yeah. Like, someone explained to me once, like, if you want to know a little bit of everything, study humanities. And so I imagine studying humanities in a time period when every other intellectual knows already a little bit about everything. To be the guy who's like the expert in knowing a little bit about everything, he probably knew I mean, I've talked to like local philosophy professors. I guarantee you Leddihn knows more than them. You know, I guarantee any guy from back then knows more philosophy than these fucks. You know, this is the people now, the intellectuals nowadays are just so pathetic. And
I mean, they're not intellectuals. That's just the word we have because there's nothing left for them. They're a shell of what they used to be.
Absolutely. And it's reading these 20th century thinkers, you kind of even just reading C.S. Lewis or someone, you're like, yeah, different class of people back then.
100%. Oh, we had Ryan back and we lost him again.
We lost him again. Okay, well here when it says Ryan, I don't know if you can hear us, but your device is not connected. We're not live, so I'll just edit this little bit out, and whenever he pops back in, we'll fix it. Yeah. Well, we'll just I'll edit that part out, but we'll just keep going from there, and then we'll when he hops back in, I'll add him in.
All right.
Where are we at? Here we go. Part 2.
You want me to keep going? Just
yeah, let's keep going. When he hops back in, I'll add him in.
All right. Before we turn to our inventory of prophetic views concerning the second quarter of the 20th century, however, we ought to recall the fact that at the very bottom of all sociopolitical problems, we find, among others, certain recurrent psychological factors. One of them we might call man's subjection to the influence of two powerful, mutually antagonistic drives, the identitarian instinct and the diversitarian sentiment. Whereas the first mentioned belongs, in a certain sense, to the animal nature of man, the latter is purely human. Yet there can be no doubt that our modern civilization decidedly favors the excessive development of the former. Democracy, mass production, militarism, ethnic nationalism, racialism, and all tendencies towards simplification put the emphasis on identity and uniformity, a fact of which John Stuart Mill was deeply conscious. It is precisely from this process of leveling and assimilation that he expected some of the worst menaces to liberty. In his essay on liberty, after enumerating the various technical causes of this general trend, he demonstrated his independence from an orthodox Benthamite utilitarianism by declaring that this development should be resisted even at the cost of material sacrifices. And then he added, the demand that all other people shall resemble ourselves grows by what it feeds on. If real resistance waits till life is reduced nearly to one uniform type, all deviations from that type will come to be considered impious, immoral, and even monstrous and contrary to nature. Mankind speedily become unable to conceive diversity when they have been for some time unaccustomed to see it.
Okay, I got something for that. I'm sorry about my connection issues. I'm not sure what's going on.
But life happens. You're in.
Yeah. So when he speaks about so when you hear the term diversity used today, I think it's important to understand that they mean like a superficial type of diversity. Like when the left speaks of including people of like different social, ethnic backgrounds, like religion, race, sex, sexual orientation, etc. Like but that's like it's like superficial. They demand like uniformity of thought and behavior, if you know what I mean. It's very surface level. And the way that they achieve the uniformity is like basically like public education, entertainment, HR departments, and they viciously attack like genuine diversity. And I believe that like genuine diversity was actually more tolerated under the system of monarchy as opposed to democracy. I mean, it wasn't celebrated, but I mean, back in the day, as long as you paid your taxes, the king kind of just left you alone, left your people alone. As long as you recognize his authority, they kind of just let you rock. And now it's, if you don't submit totally to the state, like they're going to crush you. They're going to roll you over. They're going to freeze your bank accounts and potentially lock you up.
Yeah. While you were out of the chat or out of the call for a minute, we were talking about how there's a whole different class of intellectual today. And then also, I don't know if you were still here for this or not, but we'd mentioned that it's hard to take the word liberalism seriously, but he's got this whole list of names that makes it pretty clear what he means. I mean, there are so many of these words that today in 2023, like diversity, are just such buzzwords that have become stripped of all meaning that he uses in a time when they actually had some kind of meaning and are just so much more powerful than they are today.
This is why the first chapter is like so amazing to me, is that he just has a whole chapter outlining his terms and defining his words and explaining who he is, what he believes, and outlining all the terms he's going to be using. It's they can't do it now because word changes meaning like that. Everyone has a subjective meaning to every word. But the way he outlined, so you know what he's talking about when he uses a word, is a very helpful thing that he does for this book. I mean, that's what makes this book, I think, in my opinion, like timeless almost. That you can pick it up anytime because he defines his terms in the first chapter. You can pick it up anytime and know what he means. You know, it's not going to be lost by language.
That's why, because I watched the first episode with you and Ankath. I'm glad. I mean, you guys paused and took notice that he clearly defines his terms, so we're able to communicate without misunderstanding each other. Because, like you said, we're talking about two different things. Like when he's talking about diversity, he's talking about like genuine diversity, and when we're talking about diversity nowadays, it's mostly like a black and a white guy and a lesbian. That's superficial diversity because they demand total the same type of thinking. You know what I mean? They're not actually open to diverse ideas at all. It's basically illegal to be right wing these days.
Oh yeah, it's been illegal since the what was it? The oh my god, what was the trial after World War II where they tried our Nazis?
Nuremberg.
Yeah, it's been illegal to be right wing since Nuremberg. Thank you. Could not sing that word.
I missed that first episode you guys had because I'm not listening to podcasts except for Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year during Exodus 90. But literally Easter Sunday, I'm pulling that up because those 12 pages are what make this book. This book would be meaningless by today without those 12 pages. Like they are the anchor of this whole thing. And quite frankly, it's how we should be writing now, is defining your terms up front, because words are almost worthless in today's age because people are so quick to vandalize the words themselves.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Let's continue.
I'm not sure if you wanted me to pick up because I said I would read part 2.
Yeah, go for it.
Just in case, but
yeah, because I'm gonna have to dip in 15 minutes or so anyway.
So just in case, I'll start, and hopefully no one's bothered by my accent. Sometimes I get a little bit of shit for that, but
don't apologize. It's great.
Let me give you
any more shit than I get from my voice, Ryan. You're fine.
You have at least the second best voice here.
Very good, very good. All right, let me pick it up. This craze for uniformity has been criticized by Montesquieu 100 years earlier. He insisted that there are certain ideas of uniformity which sometimes take hold of great minds. They affected Charlemagne, but infallibly strike small ones. Benjamin de Constant, who belonged to the 18th, no less to the 19th century, recognized the paralyzing qualities of uniformism when he wrote, "Variety is organization, uniformity is mechanism. Variety is life, uniformity is death."
I love that quote. That's
so good.
That is fantastic. I'm actually going to just copy that for later and tweet that after this.
I want to put that on a freaking bumper sticker on my car. You sell that on Austro Thomism and I'll buy it.
I would add it to the list tonight. That is a file quote.
All right, let me see. It is uniformity again, which figured so prominently in the French Revolution when democracy appeared in its full totalitarian garb. Reviewing its powerful Napoleonic aftermath, Constant wrote in 1814, "It is quite remarkable that uniformity never met with more favor than in revolution raised in the name of the rights and liberty of men. This systemic spirit at first went into ecstasy of symmetry. The love of power soon discovered what immense advantage this symmetry gave it. Through patriotism exists only a lively attachment to these interests, manners, and customs of a locality, or self-announced patriots declared war on all these things. They dried up this natural fount of patriotism and wished to replace it by a fictitious passion for an abstract being, a general idea deprived of all that stakes the imagination and speaks to the memory." I mean, it's it's alarming when you hear what he spoke about the French Revolution, considering the rise of communism and basically just to create the new Soviet man and abolish history. It seems like there's something like inherently evil in erasing history and natural law to create this artificial utopia where the past doesn't matter, this egalitarian it's just completely fake. It's just not genuine. It feels, I don't know, very bizarre. But a lot of people buy into it. They really do.
I don't even know that that's true. People, maybe we're all here in the glorious state of Florida and I'm free from it, but I struggle to believe people buy that much into it. I think people are lazy and don't want to fight against it, but I find it so hard to believe people really buy into that nonsense.
You really only need 10% to believe it, and then the rest of it be quiet.
And that exactly is what I think is more like. I think there's a very vocal minority and then a large majority of cowards.
But I also think that minority controls the propaganda that is modern television. That cements that view, where people don't even like. I had a friend of mine. He brought up.
Who is the minority that controls the media that you're talking about, Caleb?
Don't name them, Caleb.
It's a guy we're not live
right now.
I'm gonna put a giant beep over that. I'm gonna put a beep and then put this the Daily Wire. And
you gotta ring the bell.
I was champing at the bit when you said that.
No, but it's like I brought up. My friend brought up racism for some reason the other day, and he's a very left-wing guy. And he's like, I can't imagine judging someone for this, like the fact that they look different by the color of their skin. I'm like, do you really think that the Japanese hate the Chinese because of the color of the skin? Like,
also, I don't believe that for a second. You can't imagine someone judging someone because they look different. I 100% believe when I walk out into the world wearing, I guess my DeSantis shirt carries more than who I look, but the way I dress, even when I'm not wearing a logo, I dress in my cowboy boots and at the end in a polo, and people make the assumption that I'm right wing and I'm judged for how I look. There is no scenario where we shouldn't not judge people for how they look. I mean, obviously we shouldn't judge people on race or whatever. Make your YouTube okay. But at the end of the day, they say you don't judge a book by its cover, but like that's why books have covers. We do judge people by how they look, and it may not be that one particular detail, but there are 50 different ways we all judge people by how they look. It's absolute BS to say, oh, I can't imagine judging someone by how they look.
Speaking of judging a book by its cover, I have to. You want online for this? I'm going to show you real quick. Anybody listening? The ugliest book cover I've ever seen in my life. It starts in the middle, and you have to finish reading the title by going to the side.
What book is that? I literally can't even tell. Like, I'm having a stroke.
It's the Authoritarian Mind.
Okay.
It's a leftist book, and even the leftist book covers are leftist memes. It's just a wall of text.
Yeah. Well, that's because leftists hate beauty and good in the world, and
that's right.
Even their books have to.
But when you buy a book by its cover, I'm like, I gotta show this off for the podcast because that is the ugliest book I've ever seen. Oh, it was so ugly, yeah. I nearly returned it just to read a PDF. Like it's so ugly. I'm like, I would turn that. I ain't paying for it.
I bought the hardcover version of this book because I like the cover. Like
yes, I wanted to get a hardcover, but I couldn't find one when I was shopping for it. So I got the crappy paperback that is.
He's got it.
I've got a hardcover, but yeah.
That is like the best blue for a book. This is a perfect blue. I love it.
You know what it is? Also, the soft cover is hideous.
It is.
It's really bad.
Unless it's like a 500% price difference, and even then, I probably will then too. I always take the hardcover over the soft cover. I want a book that's gonna last and be freaking beautiful.
The thing is, I get nervous. I try to read like on my commute to work, and I actually don't. It's counterintuitive, but I don't like bringing my nice books like out of the house with me. So I got a Kindle. So I don't destroy my nice hardcovers. Now I just have books sitting on the shelf and also have the Kindle version so I can read them without destroying it.
I've got a couple books that hit that limit for me, but for the most part, like this book, I love it. But at the end of the day, if I absolutely destroyed it, I'd see if I could get another one. If the book is meant to be loved and cherished and used. I don't want it to sit on my shelf and not.
You're right.
I love,
of course you're right.
When I was at the Mises Institute this summer, I loved Patrick Newman had a copy of Rothbard's Man, Economy, and State that was like duct taped together. And I was like, would you pay extra to have it that way so you looked like you read more?
Yeah, that's a good move. I'm gonna start doing that shit. Just duct taping my books.
Let me see.
Looks nice as hell.
Let me see if I can find my place because I stopped.
They begin building the
Edifice.
Okay. They began building the edifice by breaking up and pulverizing the materials they should have used. They came close to naming cities and provinces by numbers, as they did the legions and army corps. So much did they seem to fear that a moral idea might attach itself to what they were instituting. I mean, that's just, I don't want to speak too long on that, but that's just absurd. You're afraid to name things other than just numbers and letters. It's just gross. Yeah. It just goes against everything beautiful if you think about it. It's really fucking gross.
Yeah, what's the word?
Bureaucratic. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's awful.
Well, and you think about, like, as you read through the Bible, names are so important that Jesus just straight up changes people's name when he changes their mission. Meanwhile, here we are in this disgusting world where we're like, oh, we can't give that a name because then it will have a mission. Instead, it's number 745.
Exactly.
So disgusting.
That is also like the greatest Chad move ever. It's like, hi, my name is Peter. It's like, hi, my name is Simon. No, it's Peter now. Come with me.
No, you're wrong. The greatest Chad move ever is after his resurrection when he appears to the apostles and they don't recognize him. And he points out the best fishing spots. And when they fish well, they're like, oh, now that's God. That is the best moment in the Bible, other than like the savior of all humanity.
Yeah, it's like God saving everyone, fishing.
Yeah, that is exactly the order in which I read the Bible.
I love it. Let's go.
All right, let me pick it up again. Despotism, which replaced demagoguery. You
got it close enough.
Demagoguery, and made itself heir of the fruit of all these labors. Very adroitly.
I got no clue.
Yeah, adroitly followed the Blaze Trail. These two extremes at first found themselves in agreement on this point because at bottom in both extremes was the desire of tyranny. The interests and memories which are born from local habits contain a germ of resistance which authority only reluctantly endures and hastens to uproot. It has an easier road with individuals. It enrolls its enormous weight over them and easily as over sand. I mean, that's definitely true.
That is a fantastic point. That's why I really do think like anyone who says like the fundamental unit of society is like the individual really is just opening the door for, trampling it's easier to trample an individual than a family.
Well, that's my favorite thing Pete Kuehnelt says, and I don't know if he got it from elsewhere, but I know I heard it originally from him, was that if you could remove any one word from the lexicon, it'd be individualism. Like it's another word that's become meaningless and at best is at best is nothing and at worst is hurtful.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me sorry. Today the admiration for uniformity, a real admiration in some small minds, an affected one in many servile of spirit, is received as a religious dogma by a host of assiduous echoes of every favorite opinion. It was indeed no secret to Constant that the imperialistic methods of aggression practiced by the French Revolution and the military dictatorship, which constituted its aftermath, resulted in a strengthening of the principle of uniformity. Not only the original domains of France, but also the newly conquered incorporated territories had to suffer from this mania, which proved to be so infectious. Contemporary conquerors, peoples or princes, want their empires to present only a uniform surface on which the proud eye of power can range without meeting any unevenness which may offend it or restrict its view. the same code of law, the same system of weights and measures, the same regulations, and if one can arrive at it, eventually the same language. This is what one proclaims the perfection of any social organization. One on the rest today's great word is uniformity. And I mean, when I think of that, you could hear it right here. Martin Luther King Day just passed. And that reminds me a lot of Martin Luther King's speech about, leveling the mountains and raising the valleys. And that's exactly what he said, but it's completely communist bullshit. It's egalitarian. It's all the same old tricks. And it's crazy because before you really unpack what democracy really is, because growing up, I was taught that this is how civilized people govern themselves. We consent to rules. We choose our electors, and it's really just soft communism. What I mean? I'm a construction worker. I have no fucking clue what the hell is going on in the world where I should have a vote that matters for anything. You know what I mean? That's just looking at myself personally. Why do I have a vote that counts the same as other people's?
And nor should we. I sit here and I teach middle school math. Now there are things I know about, but at the end of the day, is it echoing? My audio's all. But at the end of the day, there's no reason I should get a vote in those things. There's no reason you should get it. And issues that really have to do with construction, maybe you could step in. But at the end of the day, if you were to ask me any question about construction, and it'd be absolutely moronic to give me a vote in any construction project Ryan's working on. I mean, it'd be ridiculous.
Even on my crew, there's hierarchy. A regular worker doesn't have the same say that a foreman has, and a foreman doesn't have the same say that the supervisor has, and the supervisor doesn't have the same say that the owner has. So even on something that I know about, I still don't have an equal say in what's going to happen. If my boss tells me what I'm going to do, either I'm going to do it or I'm going to quit or lose my job. It's as simple as that. Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Walter Block once said about a jury duty that if you tried to sell that to someone without a jury duty already existing, and be like, well, no. These 12 random strangers will decide your fate. And no one would ever agree to that. And the same goes for this. If you tried to sell this without this being an idea, to say we are all going to be uniform and have equal say and whatnot, no person, start any new project of any organization ever and say, well, we're all going to be uniform and have the same jobs and the same skills and the same votes. Every person would lose their mind. No one would think that was a good idea prior to being convinced or to being propagandized that was a good idea.
Absolutely.
Let me see if I could pick it up again. Okay.
It's right after the
Cortez. Right? Donoso Cortez, who belonged to the following generation, in no uncertain terms denounced this madness, which increased in intensity with every decade until it reached a climax in our time. Konstantin Leontrev saw clearly how the basic uniformistic ideas of the French Revolution triumphed along the whole line. These had influenced the structure of the two French empires under the Bonapartes, and now affected the German victory of 1871. The pure race centralization, egalitarianism, and constitution of sufficient strength so that a man of genius will not dare to engineer a coup d'etat, support to industry and trade, and in opposition to all the aforementioned, a strengthening and a union of all elements of anarchy. Finally, militarism. Point for point, Imperial France. The nuances of difference are, from the broader and higher point of view, which we are now talking, so insignificant that it is not worthwhile even to think about them. The victory of the national racial policy has thus brought to the Germans a loss of national personality. National personality. Germany, after her victories, has been more Gallicized than ever before in her very being. Her administration, her structures, her laws, important aspects of her personal local culture have suddenly faded away.
Wow, imagine important aspects of your local culture suddenly fading away. Can't relate to that here in 2023 at all.
Oh, not at all.
I mean, you could see it from Reconstruction in the South, and now you could see it in Europe, and how they're basically all just vassal states of the United States. Their culture is basically just American with a little bit of what they had left, just a trace, really.
And on top of it, by American, it's more of like just a husky shell of what American culture would be. Like Garrett, I think his name's pronounced like Garrett Garay or something pretentious, but Garrett wrote about how it had become like out of vogue to be 100% American. And of course, he was writing in like 1940. He was writing well back when these were issues. And at the end of the day, it's still true where it's like we're exporting our culture to Europe, but then the culture we're exporting is hollow. Like it's not an actual American culture. It's just kind of McDonald's.
They call themselves global citizens now. That's one of the buzzwords that they use.
I would die for the great horned frogs of the Texas Christian University where I attended. But our thing we had to learn, like our mission statement at TCU was to learn to be a good global citizen. Like that was a major part of the mission statement.
It's a total buzzword. It's a total buzzword. You see it everywhere now. Like stakeholders. You see these types of words repeated, and they kind of come out of nowhere, and it's kind of insidious because they don't really mean what they claim to mean. Like when they talk about a global citizen, they're not talking about like a goat fucker in Afghanistan. They're talking about a New York liberal,
beep that.
Complete rootless piece of shit. And that's what they mean. Devoid of all history, unless it's a certain, I'm not going to get you in trouble, a certain history. Other than that, it's just the current day all the time. Whatever the current thing is, that's what it is.
When I went on the Tom Woods show, literally what we talked about was the whole stakeholder thing and how it's literally like stakeholder doesn't mean the people impacted by the business. It means, like what you just said, the New York liberals who want to have a say in the business but aren't actually impacted by it. And that's what gets just shoved down our throat. Like I'm in business school right now, and it's all that gets shoved down my throat. Literally, I have not taken a class that wasn't about like stakeholder capitalism and how we have to care about more than this and that, and we have to care about the environment and whatnot. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get whatever. Move past that. There's nothing you're saying. You're just yelling words at me. None of this is anything. That being said, I have to tap out. So you guys have a great job. Have a great time finishing this. It was a blast coming on here, Caleb. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you for coming on. Do you want to give your plugs real quick before you dip out?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter. It's Natural Authority without a Y because Natural Authority didn't fit. I won't see anything you do until Easter because it's Exodus 90 and I'm not on social media, but that's where you can find me. You can find a lot of the stuff I've written. I've done a lot of work with the Mises Institute. So if you look Mises.org, Connor Mortel, you'll find my stuff. And that's about it. You guys have a fantastic time. I look forward to hearing all about how the rest of this went.
Connor, good night.
I'll see you, Connor. Good night. Okay, Ryan, let's keep going. We only got about 16 minutes left in the recording. Let's keep going.
16 minutes. There's no way I'm going to get to the notes I had on 31.
I'll have to have you on again when I get to that part.
All right. One second. Oh, no.
Where we at? I think we're on page 18.
All right. Sorry about that. All right. So let me pick it up again. Jacob Burkhardt commenting with implicit bitterness on a speech of President U.S. Grant remarked, "The complete program contains Grant's latest address, which points to a single state with one language as a necessary aim of a purely acquisitive world. His apprehensions were based on the fear of revolutionary risings using totalitarian methods and envisioning totalitarian aims. It seems that an essential condition for crisis is to be found in the existence of a highly developed system of communications and the spreading of a homogeneous mentality over vast areas. But when the hour and the right material are at hand, the contagion spreads with the speed of electricity over hundreds of miles and affects the most diverse populations which hardly know each other. The message flies through the air, and they all suddenly agree on the one issue, if only a sulky admission that there's got to be a change. Okay. I could speak on this because it kind of ties into what I was going to say on page 31 anyway. Sounds good. So the way that propaganda spreads on mass communication is when he wrote this book was kind of like a new thing. I think we're used to it now. Mm-hmm. But so the way that I'm not sure what you want to call it, the state, the deep state, the managerial state, total state, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of words for what we're talking about. Basically, there's an illusion that the masses are ruled by themselves, when really it's manufactured consent, utilizing these communication services. They spread propaganda over the TVs, radio stations, and they censor what they don't want to be heard on social media. They promote what they do want to be heard. And I think that's a recent development that really, I'm glad he picks up on that, because I don't think any of this is really possible before the Industrial Revolution. I think that was a big game changer. And I think it's also dangerous because manufactured consent, it legitimizes what the state does, because the people believe that their policies have popular support, when really they were just manipulated into supporting what the state wanted to do regardless.
If anybody wants to hear more on that specifically, Pete Quinones and Buck Johnson of Buck Johnson's, I think. What's his podcast called again? You remember? Buck
Johnson's?
Yeah. What's his podcast called again?
Ah, shit.
I don't want to get it wrong. I want to plug him correctly. No, everyone knows Buck. Everyone knows Buck Johnson. He's a firefighter who's awesome. Him and Pete did a live reading of a book recently from
Counterflow.
Counterflow, thank you. Buck Johnson, the Counterflow podcast. They did a live reading of a book talking all about the manufacturing of consent to media propaganda. I recommend everybody listen to that episode because it was a really, really good episode.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to speak on that. Okay, let me see. I can pick up right here. The interrelationship between dictatorship and equality, known to Aristotle, was no secret to Walter Bagot either. The latter wrote about the French Second Empire. In France, égalité is a political first principle. The whole of Louis Napoleon's regime depends on it. Remove that feeling, and the whole fabric of the empire will pass away. We once heard a great French statesman illustrate this. He was giving a dinner to the clergy of his neighborhood and was observing that he had no longer the power to help or hurt them. When an eager crew said with simple-minded joy, "Oh, oui, monsieur." Okay, that's in. I tried.
Yeah. Okay, you know what? It's gonna bug me. I'm gonna throw in Google Translate real quick, because
it's oui, monsieur, maintenant, persona, ne, pou. I can't do. I think that's oui, monsieur. Something about proletariat.
Yes, sir. Now no one can do anything, neither the count nor the proletarian.
Okay.
That is one thing that bugs me at some of these academic writers. They don't always translate things.
There's a footnote. Not a footnote. I could look it up, but whatever.
That's fine.
The Marquis de Sade, one of the most original defenders of democratic dictatorship, combined his immoralism with the notion that the principle of equality should be extended to plants and animals, not only to man. Well, that's fucking crazy.
That is absolutely that's insane.
Okay. I mean, I could see it's so funny that we think that like these lunatics these days are like a new phenomenon when really there's just always been batshit crazy people.
You mean you want to talk about the first act of like attempt at equality was didn't the snake said to Eve that you would be like God if you ate this apple?
Yeah.
I mean the first sin that brought the first lie that brought all of sin into the world was 1, disobedience, and 2, a lie of equality.
Well, I'm glad you spoke about that because I enjoy reading Catholic writers and thinkers because they make sure to acknowledge original sin in their works. And I know you touched upon that in your first episode, but I was very glad you did, because without that acknowledgement, it's very difficult to create any type of political theory or basically anything. If you don't account, this is why these people are just like utopian. They're delusional. It's not going to happen. Man is fallen. Yes. This world is fallen.
Yeah, absolutely. Politics and you can't do politics without commenting on human nature. And if your concept of human nature is either A, it's malleable and you can create a new man in one situation like the communist man, or any other kind of view of human nature that does not account for man's fallen nature within the sin, you're already way off base, and anything going past that is going to be stupid and incorrect. It's very hard for you to. You can maybe have bits that are true, but overall, it can't be true because they don't understand human nature. This is why Catholic political thinkers, the Catholic thinkers, really need to be, in my opinion, the forefront of any reconstitution of what a political order should be in today's age. We need to be reading the Catholic thinkers because they actually understand man's human nature.
Well, in this book, he actually names a few. I know we're probably not going to get up to it, but he talks de Tocqueville in depth in this very chapter. De Maistre, there's a few. So we have a lot of good men. So there's no shortage of brilliant writing to look into.
If anyone listening to this wants a really good Catholic political philosophical thinker, go listen to Austro Thomism's True Reformers live reading. Maritain is fantastic, and everyone wants to be reading him along with Leddihn.
Oh, dude, I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, but I know I said it in the GC, but dude, that episode with Leddihn on Monarchy and War is one of my favorite podcasts ever, dude.
I'm glad you liked it. It was a lot of fun.
Group of guys you had on that was excellent. But
anytime you get Ein, Bodes, and Andrew and I all together, it's gonna be fun because we just we're all in so much of agreement, but so much disagreement, but all from different angles, but still all Catholic. It's just really fun to have those guys and all do anything together, any live reading, any podcast. It's a lot of fun to get those guys together.
That was great, man. And I'm looking forward to Bulge and Cat's new series they have going on now. So
yeah, they need to get on that. I've done 4 since their last one. They're getting lazy.
It's a dense book. You don't pick easy books either, though. This is a fucking dense book.
Yeah. No.
Right.
I was supposed to do that with Ein, but I was like, I got to read 2 more books before I could even know what Maritain's talking about. And Bo hopped in I read those 2 books. I can do it. And I'm like, thank you, because I don't have the time.
All right, let me pick back up again.
Indie Fossil, I think is where we're at.
Yeah, with 2 or 3 honorable exceptions, the tyrants who arose in all the Greek cities in the 4th and 3rd centuries reigned only by flattering whatever was worst in the mob and violently suppressing whoever was superior by birth, wealth, or merit. Yep, that's how that goes. This technique, already noted by Plato, is intrinsically democratic in the classic sense. It must be remembered that ostracism as a political institution flourished in democratic Athens and was primarily directed against outstanding persons. Dostoevsky, on the other hand, with his interests turned toward the future rather than the past, saw in the egalitarian madness the cause rather than the result of tyranny. Thus, he speaks of Singalov, the leftist ideologist in The Possessed. Singalov is a man of genius. He has discovered equality. He has it also beautifully written down in his copybook. He believes in espionage. He wants the members of society to control each other and be in duty bound to denounce their neighbors. Everyone belongs to all, and all belong to each single one. All are slaves and equals in slavery. As a final resort, there will be calumny, and murder. But the most important thing remains equality. Scary.
Mm-hmm.
Very scary, because you see what's happening now. Just even like the espionage with the COVID regime, people tattling on their freaking neighbors for having an excessive amount of guests over for Thanksgiving.
Dude, I saw like there were public schools who asked like the kindergarten and first graders after Thanksgiving break how many people they had over at their house for Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
like trying to get parents to rat out their kids. Like even in communist Russia, when a parent ratted his kid, Stalin was so like that kid's a dick. Even he knew it was awful. Like, it's so evil.
Insidious.
There's no way to put it. You just
It's gross.
It's yeah. If you, I don't know how people. I started the other day. Like I don't know how people get through their day without constantly praying. Like there's people who are getting through the day who aren't religious. I don't know how they're doing it.
This is their religion.
Ugh, it's even worse.
Egalitarian utopian society. False.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Already Blake had remarked that one law for the lion and the ox is oppressive. To Burkhardt, egalitarianism as much as such was a destructive element, a mania which would have run its course before an equilibrium could be found again and a more constructive period in history re-entered. The refrain of the song is that human inequality will somehow again be reinstated. Yet what the state and the concept of the state are going to suffer in the meantime, only the gods know. Still, the modern state, with its demo-liberal prehistory, would be the full executor of an egalitarian majoritism. Thus, Burkhardt wrote in a letter, "But I know only too well the modern state, whose irresponsible omnipotence is going to manifest itself in a very crude and practical manner. It will simply take the approximate majority of the popular mind as a measuring rod and regulate the rest according to it in a strictly disciplinary way."
Well, that's foretelling and ominously correct.
Yeah, it's. I know I keep going back to the same examples, but it's just 2020 was fucking mind blowing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was
like the facade fell, the curtain fell. Like
no one cared.
It's evil.
It's like the amount of people I know who still defend mask use and the vaccines, even after all the evidence has come out. And I feel more confident talking about the dangers of the vaccines after the Surgeon General of Florida basically started his own investigation and everything into it. But it was obvious to people. I have a friend who's very COVID conscious and that kind of nonsense. And we argued for like every day during 2020 about all the shit. And every time we argued, he's telling me an idiot. And then 2 months later, I'd be proven right. And he's never commented any time I've been proven right. And I don't bring it up because I'm not an asshole. But it was just like, come on, man. Everything I said was correct. Everything you believed was wrong. And you trusted the experts. Maybe these experts are wrong.
Dude, what was that? Oh my God, that Neil deGrasse fucking touch grass. that episode was crazy. And then who is Sam Harris? Is like these people were broken by the COVID regime, absolutely broken. It's sad to see, and you're right. You don't want to be an asshole, but at the same time, there should be some acknowledgement and at the bare minimum, some apologies, and I think some people deserve to be in prison.
Absolutely,
straight up in prison.
This seems like page 20. Seems like a good place to stop. We covered 8 pages.
I made it.
This is gonna be the longest live reading I've ever done. I'll probably be doing this in the next year.
I hope I was able to stumble through it. Okay.
Oh, you did great. You did great. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on. Any kind of concluding thoughts about what we covered today? And then after that, go ahead and give your plugs.
Dude, I think it's chilling how accurate that Leddihn was all those years ago. Because it's like I said, the curtain's completely fallen now. So if you can't see what's going on now, I don't think reading this book's going to help you. But I assume your audience knows what's good. So
I don't assume that.
Here. And just Blue Collar Ryan on Twitter. That's it.
Wonderful. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a lot of fun. Make sure you guys follow Ryan on Twitter, follow Connor on Twitter. More live readings coming out. I got to find a guest for the Catholic Church, Western Civilization Part 2. But I got a few more interviews dropping, a few great guests set up. Website is still down. Hopefully it's coming back up this week. Hopefully. Make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. Sign up on the Patreon to get early access to everything. Yeah, have a good night.